On this episode of Energy Superheroes, Nada Ahmed, founding partner at Energy Tech Nexus, dives into Houston's dynamic energy startup scene. She explores how big corporations are backing innovation, what makes a founder succeed, why pilot projects matter, and how startups and investors must align to drive the energy transition and decarbonization forward. Let's get started. Nada Ahmed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you, and you work in an area that's near and dear to my heart, which is startups. Understand that you're in the Houston area and supporting startups around that ecosystem there. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, no, so I am a founding partner at Energy Tech Nexus, which is the biggest startup hub focused on energy transition and decarbonization here in Houston. We have over 120 startups that are members, ranging from CCS, hydrogen, lithium extraction, offshore wind technology, all types of different things to drilling bits that are more efficient. And so we're really taking advantage of being in Houston, which is the energy capital of the world. We have a lot of great talent here. We have the highest amount of chemical engineers per, I think, GDP or something. And not just chemical engineers, I would say all types of engineers. We have great facilities available here to test your technology. And so we really want to be part of building more of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Because when you think about Houston, you don't really think about startups. But that's changing.
It's changing fast, and I know I'm glad to hear that you guys are playing a part of it. We're working on two projects in the Houston area, as we talked about. We love Houston. I get out there all the time, and I'm always blown away by all the great companies there. Baker Hughes is in that area, Occidental, a lot of big companies, ExxonMobil. What role do you see some of these bigger companies playing in the startup ecosystem? And has that changed recently? Does it continue to increase, or have they been maybe pulling back a bit?
They definitely play a big role, and they're very active within the ecosystem. So I would say over the past 5 years, kind of during COVID and since COVID, there's really been from the city and a lot of organizations here, like the Greater Houston Partnership, an effort to really spur more innovation and build a startup ecosystem. All these big corporates, the strategics, they have their corporate VC groups, their venture capital teams, their innovation teams that have traditionally kind of gone to the coasts to get talent, but also realize, Houston's a great place to spur this kind of innovation. So they're part of also cultivating the ecosystem by being part of communities. Like we have a space here called ION, which is in collaboration with Rice University or owned by Rice University. Then we have Greentown Labs, which came down from Boston 5 years ago. And all of that has really played a really important role in building the ecosystem. And basically these big corporates like Oxy, like ExxonMobil, like Chevron have really funded these spaces where founders can come, learn from one another. There are, labs available for them to test. And so I think they play a really important role in helping kind of also guide the strategy for these startups on like what they be focusing on going forward based on what they're interested in, because in the long term, they will be their customers or an exit partner for them.
No, very cool. We've seen that as well. As it relates to the companies that you're working with, could be companies you're working with or other startups you've seen in the Houston area. What are a couple that come to mind that are making a big impact? Could be for the climate, could be financially. Just give us a couple names would be
Yeah.
awesome.
So one of the companies, if you're if you want to know about what's really happening in Houston that we're really proud of, one of them is called CZG Plasmonics. They're building these reactors that use light instead of chemicals to, break down molecules and produce things like syngas, hydrogen. So it's a hydrogen reactor in essence that is producing clean fuel. And they have gotten a lot of traction. Saudi Aramco has been an investor there. Another company called Samvita, they are using microbes. So they're engineering microbes to produce SAF, to produce biofuels and other kind of compounds that are better for the environment. One of the founders that I'm really good friends with, she came to Houston and decided that in Texas, we have a lot of land that's not being used. So she's growing cactus there and then using that cactus to create different bioproducts. So a lot of companies focusing on taking advantage of us also being a hydrogen center. There's a demand for hydrogen for a lot of the chemical industry. How do you produce that hydrogen? Because traditionally, the way hydrogen's produced, it releases a lot of emissions. So how can you make that clean? Last week or two weeks ago, we went and visited one of our companies called Hertha Metals. They're building steel. So that's, steel production, cement production. Those are types of industries that are hard to abate. And she's looking at how to produce steel and reduce emissions by 90% from the traditional way that it's done. And traditionally, when you're producing steel, you use natural gas, but she's figured out a way to, or actually you use coal. So she's figured out to replace that coal with natural gas, and other enzymes and chemicals that you use. And so she has a pilot facility north of Texas that's doing really well, and she's looking to fundraise and scale that. And it's just amazing to see like on the ground facilities, and people working on like pretty big problems for today.
No, I love those. All three companies sound super interesting. And the one replacing coal with natural gas, I think, is really exciting. We've been able to reduce our emissions in this country a lot just by moving from coal to gas in electricity generation. So to me, it only makes a ton of sense. Why not do it with steel production or other hard to abate industries? I mean, I think that's a really pragmatic solution. Sounds like you know a lot of startup founders. Crazy question, but what makes a good startup founder or a great startup founder in terms of personality, in terms of how can you tell if when you're talking to a founder if they're going to be a great founder?
Good question, because they're all different, right? But I think one of the things is that we found, and we tell our founders, is focus. Especially, right now, the market is, going a little bit up and down. It's a little bit volatile. Venture capital is not as available as it has been in the past couple of years. But in these time, in particular, you can't be spreading yourself thin. And really having clarity on what are you going to say no to becomes more important than what are you saying yes to, right? Like all these things that don't fit your strategy. And when you don't have a lot of funds available, what are some of the other projects that you should not be doing right now, but instead
Yeah.
focusing on the main thing that's really going to drive you forward? So I think just having that clarity is really helpful. And secondly, I would say, as a startup founder, if you're really going to grow your team, being a good leader, and a lot of us underestimate that and don't talk about that. And it's not only just about leading yourself, but are you able to build a team around you? Are you able to lead people and give them the autonomy that they need, but also a very strong alignment with what the company is trying to achieve?
No, those are great. I mean, focus and leadership, the focus one we see all the time. Everybody accuses investors of being, attention deficit disorder. Like we won't look at things for more than a half second, right? But that focus is so key because when you look at the first page of a teaser, if you don't get it as an investor right away, you're on to the next one because you see so many. And having focus and clarity is absolutely critical, both in terms of getting investor attention, but also just in terms of using scarce resources because startups are limited in what they have. The only way to compete is to focus. So that is absolutely true. And the leadership one, wow, like especially when funds are tight and raising the next round takes a long time and maybe the valuations aren't what they wanted them to be. You have to have that intangible leadership quality to keep those valuable team members around you. So it's just
And
super.
that's, and I think that's like when you're investing in companies as a PE firm, right? Like being able to identify, because sometimes you can have a person who's very good at leading themselves and doing all these different tasks that can be very impressive, but you realize to really be able to scale, you can't be dependent on that one person, right? But how are they actually then letting someone else do the tasks that they're doing, trusting someone else to do it, but also guiding them and teaching them and mentoring them. And that takes time. I mean, I struggle with this as an entrepreneur myself now is, if I get, two other interns coming to me this summer now, it's going to take a lot of my time. But if I don't dedicate that time to them, I'm not really going to get any outcome that's going to be valuable for me.
Yeah, those the intern. We get a lot of we've worked with interns and not worked with interns, and it's for sure a double-edged sword because it takes more time in the beginning. You're hoping they save you time, but in the beginning it takes more time. So you have to be a patient person to take that time. And we've seen in the long run it pays off, but it does, take a few months to kind of get them going.
Absolutely, and interns are hard. I mean, to begin with, but when it comes to outsourcing, right? Like bringing on someone who does admin for you or manages our events for us. If we're not being a leader to them, helping them, giving them the whole context of what they need to do their job, because we're just so busy with everything as a founder, you'll just not have enough time, but you prioritize that you give your team what they need to do their job.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely true. So you mentioned the market a little bit, when
True.
funds are a little bit tighter. Tell me about the market, maybe since you got into it, and how are things this year, and sort of when do you see light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, so last year globally, when you see the numbers, we had, I think, $2 trillion US dollars of investment going into energy transition, clean energy. And I bet in 2025 it's going to be way less than that. And we're already seeing with our Houston founders, I think many of them, there was data that came out last year. The funding was like within hundreds of thousands, sorry, hundreds of millions that were raised by founders. And this year, they've only been able to raise maybe two to $300,000 total, like cumulative of all the startups that are within the region. So definitely, there's a drop. We're hearing from everybody. I was at OTC, which is an offshore technology conference here in Houston, big conference, big event this year, and Sarah Week a few weeks ago, and everyone is just holding their cash. Strategics don't want to invest in any projects right now. Any projects that we're going to take any investment decision on, then putting it on hold because they want a bit more clear direction on, not only where the economy is going to go, but where the government's going to focus on. And so everyone's just kind of sitting and hoarding their cash, and that obviously affects a lot of startups in our ecosystem. And they have to be quite wise in how they're spending their money and what direction they take now, given that it's going to be tight for the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned government. Inflation Reduction Act create a lot of incentives. People aren't for sure now what incentives are going to remain, which ones are going to go away, if any. Just that alone, I think from our standpoint, we look at a lot of deals. We'd love to have clarity. We pulled back on looking at any battery storage deals because we're not sure if the Inflation Reduction Act investment tax credit's going to be there. We would love to have clarity one way or the other, just to know kind of how things are going to shake out.
Exactly. Talking about battery storage, I think in Houston, in Texas, we've seen a big rise in solar power generation together with battery, and that's something we're going to be dependent on for the long term to match the renewable power that we have. And we've seen a lot of investments in the past year, but you're right, like not translated into this year because, like you, many other investors are just holding back.
Yeah, and we've also seen a
Hmm.
number of the larger infra funds and private equity funds go to put their battery storage project portfolios on the market and for sale, and they've all done it at the same time. So, I mean, I'll bet you I've seen 10 or 12 portfolios come on the market of battery storage and solar and wind just in the last, call it, couple months. That's a lot of projects for sale. These are operating projects, but so many that are out there, that's going to drive prices down, I think, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, but do you think they're good deals though? Like, I mean, do you think it's going to go back up?
Existing projects, I do. Yeah, because set aside battery, wind and storage is the lowest cost per megawatt hour of generation. It's always going to be because they don't have any fuel costs. So there's definitely a place as long as Texas continues to grow as a population center with manufacturing coming online, there's a huge shortage of power. So I think at least with wind and solar, I think people are being a little overreactionary and selling their portfolios. Um, battery is another question because, you can only really support maybe an hour of need with a battery. And there's so many projects in the interconnection queue. The thought is that are more going to be coming online and there may be an excess supply of battery projects given the amount of wind and solar. They just came on so fast. We're believers in gas. We invest in gas. We think gas is there's a shortage of gas on the Texas grid anyway, and the data centers need it because they need reliability. So they just need continuous power supply. So we think more gas comes online, but yeah, wind and solar is here to stay, and there's probably going to be more of it coming after kind of we cycle through what's out there today.
Yeah, and just to dispatchability of natural gas, having natural gas on the grid. And like you're saying, we spoke about earlier, ExxonMobil announced a 1.5 gigawatt project of natural gas together with CCS. We're seeing other players that are traditionally not within the natural gas power generation sector enter the market. So it's definitely a market that's growing.
It's exciting. And now we've also heard, because there's a shortage of gas turbines to make the gas electricity, GE, Siemens, Mitsubishi are all sold out really through 2030.
Mm.
So the NextEra CEO came out last week and said, people haven't thought about this, but we need more wind and solar actually as a bridge to the point where we can build gigawatts and gigawatts of more natural gas to support these data centers. And Texas is really ground zero for it because you've got so many data centers coming. But then also with the tariffs, you've had so many announcements of companies building things, making other stuff, manufacturing, chips or other things in Texas. That's going to take a lot of electricity. And then you've got the population shift from northern states to
Mm.
Texas. So Texas is just like right where everything is going. I mean, I'm a little jealous you're in Houston, although I love it here because I
Yeah.
like voting. But Houston is like the best, I think, city in the world right now for everything energy.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here. And last year, in Houston, we did the Houston Energy and Climate Week. It was the first time that we did that in September because we were like, hey, everyone has their climate weeks, but we need ours. Not only just climate and energy. And Austin has this South by Southwest. We need our thing, so we're now creating our own thing, and we have events all around the city. Rice University has this Energy Tech Forum where they have companies from their Clean Tech Accelerator program present. We have people come in from all around the world. Halliburton has their demo day that week. And what we're doing at Energy Tech Nexus is, and a problem that we really want to solve is, Houston's known for its big industrial corporations, right? You have the big oil and gas companies headquartered here. You have energy companies here. You have chemical plants here. And we believe Houston's the place where you want to pilot your new projects and your new technology. And so we are going to have our signature event during Climate Week called the Pilotathon. And the concept there really is it's like a hackathon, but for pilots. And we want companies not to just pitch their company, but pitch a pilot, like actual pilot. Because on the supply side, like corporates are looking for good pilots. They want good pilots' ideas, and startups, more than just funding, or not only just funding, they need actual startup companies to be able to say, yes, let's pilot your gas turbine, or let's pilot your new technology for hydrogen generation in our plant. So whatever, whatever turbine that you're building, or whatever compression facility that you're building, you want to be able to test and pilot that somewhere. And so our idea is that we're going to do this every year. This is the second year that we're doing it. And we can create some kind of a framework for corporates to understand how can we create an easier way to do these pilots and shortcut our like 36 months a timeline that we usually have to qualify for a pilot. How can we decrease that maybe even by 1 year? Because in those 36 months, that startup is going to die. They need a lot of funding to be able to survive that long until you make your decision. So how can we make better, quicker decisions? And then we're also thinking on the financial side of this. You have like in the Bay Area, we developed the safe notes for people to be able to make easier decisions on investment. Can we create something like that for pilots? A standard agreement, not only on the financial side, but everything else that they need in terms of IP, safety, etc. That just makes the process a lot easier for startups, but it's also very beneficial for corporates.
For sure. I mean, these are brilliant ideas, actually. And, I don't want to over compliment you, but honestly, we hear a lot of things on the show and me, just in finance. But that's absolutely right. You're thinking about the right way. You got to get the corporates involved. Pilot projects is brilliant because most of these corporates hear venture, they don't understand the language, and it just seems risky to them, like they're throwing their money in a hole. So when they can come to pilot, that's putting their money towards physical assets that are going to directly benefit them. And then, yeah, like creating simple agreements because, commercial agreement in the oil and gas world might be 150 or 200 pages long. EPC contracts, people fight about them for months and months and months. Like they get bogged down, and they're used to because they're built big, multi-billion dollar projects. But for these pilots, It should just be a simple agreement. And if they could come up with something, yeah, exactly like the safe note that they do in Silicon Valley that they came up with for venture, I think it makes a ton of sense. It just makes it easier to get deals done. And you're in the hub of that in Houston where there's so many good corporates. I've got some ideas with you. I'll share after the show for sure.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you. Yeah, so we're really excited about that. And like you said, there's so much happening in Houston. It's growing really fast. Texas in general is growing. There's energy demand. Um, it'll be interesting to see. I know with this new administration, new focus on like drilling and oil and gas, but obviously all that depends on the market because the oil price is going down too, and it'll be interesting to see the changes that would bring.
For sure. And, Texas out there, low cost of exploration for oil and gas. So, our view is that the oil price will continue to remain stable, at least in the state of Texas. And you're having people shift in many ways, from oil to electricity. So you've got this electrification going on. I think the big oil companies know this and they have tons of cash to invest. So positioning pilots in a way they can get behind easily, it makes sense for those guys. So, well, this has been great. Nada, can you tell people how to get in touch with you? I think both founders need to reach out. We need to get this in front of the corporates. They should be reaching out. We call them strategics, but, same principle. And, who else should be reaching out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we also have an investor program because that's something also we feel that we need in Houston. If you're going to have a startup ecosystem, someone's got to fund them, and we can't be dependent on people from outside coming and funding these projects. And we have capital in Houston, not only strategics, but we have family offices. We have people who made a lot of money in oil and gas, and so how can we teach them? Because this is not funding in hard tech in infrastructure is not the same as funding in digital companies in SaaS, and you know this, Peter. So how do we train ourselves and learn together on how to get these projects off the ground, how to avoid those valleys of death that come, before building your first of a kind project? Because those projects are really, really hard to fund because often you're not asking for, like in a digital company, 3 to 10 million, you're asking for 50 million projects to actually be able to do that pilot. So it's a large amount of funding that's required, and also the life cycle of when you would get the return is longer too. So that also is something that we need to become comfortable with in taking those kind of risks. So we have an investor program. We have the pilotathon coming up for any startups who want to come to Houston. Put yourself in front of these strategics. We have the likes of Chevron, Oxy, who are going to be there on the judging panel and choose one that they want to move forward with in some way. Not saying that they're going to commit to one right away after your 5-minute pitch, but yeah, so you can reach out to us on, you can find me on LinkedIn, another Ahmed. Our website is www.energy.technexus. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get all the information that you need. Join our community.
Nada, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Hope to stay in touch. And like I said, I promised some ideas after the show. And I think the audience enjoyed having you on Energy Superheroes. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.